Congratulations on the honor. Now, it's always good.
board, and as co-chair was a legislative appointment. Surprise, surprise, I guess to some, the governor reached out through his office and issued a letter of appointment to me, asking me to continue him recognizing his appointment authority to appoint me to a position here. And with that, we want to express our appreciation to Lieutenant Governor, who has served in the capacity I now sit, both as a member of the board and also as co-chair. We have appreciated her leadership and her support very much on this board and also for this project. So the governor, having officially appointed me both as a member of the board and as also to continue as co-chair, I'm sure to you, I don't look any different, but have a little different authority. Also, with the end of legislative term for some of our other members, comes a time for introducing our new members of the board. Representative Stenquist, seated to my far right there, was appointed by the House Speaker, and also Representative Jordan Tusher, directly to my right, who was appointed by the Speaker to fill those vacancies left by members of the House. And Representative Tusher is also appointed co-chair. So myself and Representative Tusher will be your co-chairs this year and going forward. So officially calling the meeting to order, and with that welcome, I'd like to turn some time first to Representative Stenquist and then Representative Tusher to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourselves, and also if you've got any feelings or thoughts about this serving in this new capacity. You've probably had a chance to look into it, and I know Representative Stenquist, this is in your backyard. Anyway, if you wouldn't mind, take a few minutes. I'll get a light on for you. There's your light on now. Let's try that one. How about that one?
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Snow. I'll be brief. I think most people are acquainted with what I've been doing, but yeah, this area at Point in the Mountain, the former prison property, is something that, yes, it's in my backyard, and I've been a resident of Draper for more than 25 years. And so I've, drive by this site every day and have been very aware of the history, even going back to when Governor Huntsman was advocating for building a new prison and redeveloping the site. During my service on the Draper City Council for 12 years between 2006 and 2017, I also was advocating with the legislature to build a new prison because of the value of the site. So this is something that I've had an interest in for a very long time, and representing the residents of Draper on the city council and now in the legislature. I think it's something that's in the best interest of not only the people that live in that area, but also of the state if we do it right. And having been a part of land use decisions around Draper City for many years, I understand land use, I understand the area, I understand the community. The new district that I represent after redistricting, which is now District 46, encompasses Draper's, a large amount of Draper City and Bluffdale City. So on both sides of this site, including the site itself, are within my district, which is why I think it was important that I be able to serve on this board and be able to be a voice for the residents that are most directly impacted by the development that'll happen there. And I have been paying close attention. I've been meeting with Alan over the years. He's been keeping me in the loop on what's happening with the site. So I've been aware and watching the work that this board has been doing for a couple of years, and you've been doing great work. I'm particularly excited about this site because I do think it is a tremendous opportunity for us to do something very innovative. I like the direction that you've been going, trying to do something different here. And because it is owned by the public, by the people of the state of Utah, it is an opportunity to be driven not just by short-term profit concerns, but actually staying true to that long-term vision that it really can be a site that's different than others. And so I am very excited to be a part of that and to be a voice for the people that live adjacent to it.
Thank you, Representative. And we're pleased to have you here, and you've just outlined so many reasons why it's important that you're a member of the board. So
Thank you.
thanks for that. All right, Representative Tusher.
Well, thank you. For those who don't know me, my name is Jordan Tusher. I represent District 44, which is primarily the west side of South Jordan and kind of the southwest corner of West Jordan. My district includes the majority of the Daybreak community, at least as far as it's built out at this point. And that's where I reside. I've been a lifelong resident of the state and also of that area, and am just thrilled to be a part of this project. I got some notice back in May that this was a likely pending assignment that I would have. And so I've been involved, or tried to be involved and get up to speed as quickly as I can in attending board meetings. I had the opportunity to attend the presentations of the developers for the first phase, which I think was really important to see that process, and really felt like I had some buy-in on the decisions that the board made, even not being a member of the board at that time. And even before that, as vice chair of the Business, Economic Development and Labor Sub-Appropriations Committee, was used to working with Alan, hearing some of the presentations from Representative Snow, and just so excited about the opportunity and this project. I think I'd be remiss without just taking a second to thank the great work that Chair Snow had done before this, and also Representative Handy, who filled these legislative assignments before. And I certainly have big shoes to fill as I step into this, but I'm super lucky that those shoes that I'm filling are right next to me, and will be able to continue to take control of the helm and steer us in the right direction. As far as the project as a whole, I truly believe, as I think most of the members of this board believe, that this is the most significant development project in the history of our state, and is really a generational opportunity for us to get involved and be able to set the right foundation and path for this to be an economic driver for our states and our communities. And it expands beyond just Draper and Bluffdale, but into the entire county and surrounding counties. And so excited to be a part of this. There's a lot of work to do, and just appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We welcome again both of you, and I can say, having served with both these gentlemen for several years in the House, we are well served, and we will be well served having them a member of this board, and having their input and beneficiaries of their experience. So with that, let's move on to the regular business of our meeting. The next item is time for public comment. We remind everyone attending here and those attending virtually that this is a public project, and we always allow time at the beginning of our meeting to hear comments from the public. And from time to time, we do hear those comments, and they've been helpful and I think impactful at times. So with that, I'll turn to our tech advisors. First, we have one virtual comment. Anyone here in the members of the public in the in this room that would like to speak? Taking that opportunity, not seeing anyone. Let's go to the person online and have them identify themselves. And I think our rules allow you a few minutes to make comments. So welcome to our meeting. Please introduce yourself, and we'd like to hear from you. the property lies within Draper municipal limits. It is not owned by Draper City. It is properly owned and titled in the state of Utah, the entire property with which we're dealing with. Hope that helps answer that question. Any other comments from the public? None indicate. So with that, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item number 3, to consider approving the minutes of our last meeting held December 13th. Copies of those minutes have been distributed to members of the board, and the chair would entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Thank you, Commissioner. The motion is to approve the minutes of December 13th, 2022. All in favor of that motion? Excuse me, I need a second. Thank you, Mayor.
I'll second.
Thank you. Who was that? Probably April. I think we've got an additional second there. Thanks, April. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously, I believe. The next item on our agenda is to consider the annual audit report. We have here with us today, I believe, Jason Allen and Caleb Crump, who are with our state auditor's office. They have undertaken their duties as auditors to conduct a review, and they're here today to present their findings. So let me get mics on for both of you. Let me just say, as preview, by statute, and even if it wasn't required by statute, it's sound practice that we have an independent auditor review the aspects of our finances and operations annually. As in past years, we've engaged the Office of the State Auditor to conduct an agreed upon procedures review for fiscal year 2022. So Jason, we welcome you, and Caleb, who conducted the review. And in past years, our state auditor, John Dougal, has attended as well. He may participate, but I don't see him here today. So
Not today.
So let's turn the time over to these gentlemen from the auditor's office, and then they'll be available for questions as well.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jason Allen. I'm the engagement manager over this agreed upon procedures engagement that we performed this year. We're grateful for the opportunity to come here today to present to the board the agreed upon procedures. The agreed upon procedures engagement it's a little bit less than an audit due to the size of the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority right now. It does not need to present financial statements and whatnot, but the agreed upon procedures is something that we perform specific identified procedures that we agree with management to conduct. And those you should have copies, hard copy, and there's also electronic copy that's available and will be posted to our website probably today for this report. There were 3 procedures that we performed this year, similar to what we've performed in the past. One of them being that we reviewed the authorities posting of financial information to the transparency website in accordance with the policy and the requirements, state law requirements related to that. For whatever reason, this year we found one transaction for a little over $16,000 that was not included in the upload to transparency. I'm not exactly sure why that was the case, because it's reported as part of the state's financial statements or financial reporting system, the FiNet, that State Finance uploads to the transparency website. So our transparency team is working with State Division of Finance to be able to identify and resolve this issue so that all of the transactions are actually reported on the transparency website. We selected 23 reimbursement or disbursements for the authorities for fiscal year 2022, which ended in June 30th, 2022, to make sure that they're consistent with the authority's purpose that they have adequate supporting documentation, and follow the policies and procedures, whether that's purchasing or other policies and procedures within in that. And we found no exceptions as a result of those procedures. We also selected 1 month of the purchase card policy or purchase card purchases, trace those to the original receipt records, and made sure that those are being reconciled and reviewed by someone other than the card holder. And there again, we found no exceptions as a result of our procedures. So overall, good. It seems to be doing good as far as the documentation and information that's reported into Finet. As the authority grows and the need for financial statements, preparing financial statements. Well, let me back up for a minute. The activity is reported in this as part because the Point of the Mountain is part of the state. It is reported as in the state's annual comprehensive financial report, which was released in December. So there is a column that you can see some of the assets, liabilities, revenues, expenditures of the Point of the Mountain Authority in the state's financial statements. But as the need grows over the year, if there's a need for individual financial statements for the authority, we can deal with that and be able to get the financial statements and audited financial statements, whether we perform that or we can work with that to get those needs as that needs arise. So any questions anybody has?
Any questions from the board? Let me, Alan, our director, would you mind taking a moment, maybe comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Caleb and Jason, for your work on this audit. Been professional through it all, and we've enjoyed working with you on it. I also think it's important to thank our partners at the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. They are handling the administrative matters for our organization and processing the payments and keeping the records, and they've done a terrific job, and we are very, very grateful for that partnership with them. I just wanted to make sure that we were able to say that.
But they've been good to work with. Appreciate the relationship that we have and kind of developing over since we've been doing. I think this is the 3rd year, if I remember right, of doing this type of agreed upon procedures, and we look forward to doing it, meeting your needs for financial reporting as we go on and into the future. So.
Thank you. I think one of the benefits too of having this process undertaken annually is one of the things that you get to do is if there are procedures or something that we're doing that could be done better, you can provide guidance that way. And I've noticed as we've listened to audit reports and other committees that I've sat on that occasionally there are issues that come up that way, and the auditors provide the guidance to allow the agencies to address those. So we appreciate your assistance, and we anticipate also, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I would anticipate this to be an ongoing relationship too. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, and if there's anything, these agreed upon procedures, when we're doing these agreements, if there's anything that the board or management wants us to look into in specific, we can certainly modify our procedures and things like that to fit your needs. So it doesn't have to be the same three things year after year. So in fiscal year 23, if there's other areas of concern or other areas of risk or things like that you want us to look at as an agreed upon procedure, we can do that. And like I said, as the need for individual financial statements with their own opinion comes up, we can certainly adapt and go for that as well. So
Thank you.
please let us know.
Thank you. That's your motto. We're from the State Auditor's Office and we're here to help you. Right?
Yep, we
All
are.
right. Well, thank you. We'll excuse you or at least allow you to sit back. I don't think there are any other questions. Members of the board, you'll notice that this is on the agenda for action. So it's appropriate that the chair entertain a motion to receive the auditor's report. And I would entertain that motion. Thank you, Jim. Motion is that we receive the auditor's report. Do I have a second of that motion? Second, Representative Stenquist. Discussion on that motion. Not hearing any and not receiving any indication from our members joining virtually. I'll place that motion for a vote. All in favor of that motion to receive the auditor's report that it's just been addressed and has been submitted to us, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no.
Aye.
The yeas have it and unanimously. So it is received by motion. Thank you again, gentlemen, for your help and for being here. Well, with that, we'll move on to the next item, which is legislative preview. And we're always pleased to have our legal counsel, J.C. Skinner, join with us. She, I think, has been with us nearly since the beginning of our work. By statute, we all recognize that the legislative session begins shortly, I believe a week from today, if my calendar is correct. I knew you guys would be nodding quickly. As an independent state entity, the Land Authority is affected directly by what happens in the legislature and during the session. We will be actively involved. We have proposed changes to our enabling statute and are seeking a contribution to our revolving loan fund for backbone infrastructure. And we anticipate there may be other legislative bills that could impact our activities. So with that, JC, thank you again for being here. We'll turn the time to you and allow you to update us and receive our questions.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, chairs and board members. It's nice to be with you today. If you'll indulge me, I'm going to share my screen here momentarily. Hopefully this works all right. Okay, should be all right there. Let's see. Okay, there we go. As Representative Snow, and forgive me, Chair Snow, I'm going to call you representative perpetually. It has mentioned as legislative session is coming up, like all state entities, we have been keeping throughout the year a running list of items that have come up that need some attention. And as a relatively new and relatively unique state entity, there are every year there are going to be issues that we come up that we need to address and that we need to adjust, and we need to make sure that we're putting in place so that we can move forward. And this year we have a number of items that we will be addressing. Candidly, most of them will seem rather mundane. So I'm going to start with the big highlights that are going to seem a little bit more exciting, and walk through those that will continue to allow you all to operate this commission in a way that's going to make the most of the state, provide this site on behalf of the state, and provide the best return for the state. We'll just walk through these. These are going to address some issues related to financing. As Representative Snow mentioned, there are requests for funding from the state that will be related to this, but we'll address some other issues related to other funding and our ability to use funding that comes in, as well as some management issues. So I'm just going to walk us through that list. I will encourage questions as they come through if you prefer to take them throughout, or I'm happy to take them at the end, whichever the chair's preference is. The first item that we're going to be dealing with is affordable housing. Deputy Director Cuthbertson talked about this in the Commission on Housing Affordability, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, and addressed some of these issues, but we do anticipate dealing with a number of issues related to affordable housing. Primarily from our perspective legislatively, we are proposing that we create a point of the mountain accommodation tax. most people are familiar with what's called a transient room tax, or what's affectionately known as a TRT, that is a tax on room accommodations and related services. This is something that we anticipate creating in within the point for rooms in that space. This would not usurp a municipality imposed tax or a county imposed tax. So it'd be something additional, but that would be dedicated to affordable housing. We are proposing that we create an affordable housing trust fund that we would work together with not only Draper City, but surrounding municipalities to be able to amplify some of these funds coming in, this dedicated funding stream, to be able to utilize some funds that other cities may have available to be able to fulfill our statutory charge and also the state need to address some specific affordable housing needs, specifically for workforce housing, essential professionals, those who work in the public sector and otherwise, so that as our statutory charge tells us to do, we can help facilitate people being able to work or live close to where they work and help to provide housing for those who work at our site. So that is one piece that we anticipate moving forward with. Additionally, we intend to address some issues related to sales and use tax distribution. Because this is a state project, as was previously stated in response to a question, this is state land as well. And all existing land authorities in the state do utilize a portion of the state sales and use tax. And so we anticipate doing the same. We're working with Draper City and the State Tax Commission to determine exactly what that is going to look like. But we do anticipate utilizing a portion of that piece to help fund the infrastructure at this site, to help make sure that the site provides the best return to the state that it can. We're also going to be making some changes. Again, these will be rather technical, but just dealing with the revenue use and dedication of the various revenue streams that come in to make sure that this board can, in the most efficient and quick way possible, utilize the funds. So not only making sure that they are available for this board's dedication, but that in working with the various entities that have been created to provide checks and balances, that those are done in a very unique way. So Representative Stenquist will well remember, and forgive me, my mind just went blank, but the creation of a new board that will oversee and make approvals related to bonding issues and other things like that. We want to make sure that, thank you, the Finance Review Commission, making sure that we are utilizing all of these steps, but that it is done in a way that's not going to take a year and a half to get approvals or authority to use or dedicate any funds.
Excuse me, Jason.
Yes.
Representative Tusher has a question, and it's, I think, about a previous.
Of course.
Yeah, sorry to make you go back here,
That's all right.
but as you talked about the creation of the Point of the Mountain accommodation tax, I just wondering, and maybe for all these items, kind of an initial question would be, do you know who's championing each of these issues in the legislature? I think that'd be interesting for us to know as we can help move these issues along. But secondly, on that tax, I can imagine questions from our own colleagues asking about, what makes the Point of the Mountain different than any other, area where they're trying to get affordable housing that would necessitate the need for an additional tax like this. And I'd love for your thoughts and comments as we can.
Of course, and forgive me for not addressing your first issue in my introduction. Senator Stevenson is anticipating sponsoring a bill that would encompass almost all of these issues. As you all are typically try to lump everything together to make sure that we get everything moving forward. Although I will at the end, there are a few issues that we will be watching in other bills. Senator Fillmore is also the chair of the Commission on Housing Affordability. We have contemplated whether this accommodation tax would fit better with that commission's bill. At this point, I think we're anticipating, and again, this may change and we're happy to take direction from you all, but anticipating it staying in the Point of the Mountain directed bill that Senator Stevenson will sponsor. But, and during the session, those things can change. But at this point, we do anticipate everything being in that section. And we're really hoping that you all will be very supportive and help champion those issues as they go forward. And then in response to your question about, why is this space special? That's a very good question, and one that I think we talk about in this meeting every time. One of the major pieces is that this is a state project. And Director Allen, I may ask you to respond to this as well, but this is a state project. This is on state land. And we have gotten a message not only through legislation, but loud and clear from your colleagues and surrounding communities that the state needs to set a good example in this space. And so as this board explored what different opportunities they could pursue to address those affordable housing issues, this is an idea that we came up with, that Director Cuthbertson came up with, and working together with Draper City is something that we could put forward as a good opportunity for the state to help address some of these issues. To your point, I think a lot of communities may look, they may look to this as a good idea to do this. This accommodation tax is not, I will say, not entirely unique to the Point of the Mountain, and again, not created yet, but the Military Installation Development Authority, MIDA, has a similar type of tax. Theirs is dedicated actually just back to MIDA, and it goes back into their own projects. It's not dedicated to affordable housing, but as we looked at that existing funding stream, essentially, it seemed like there was a good correlation to look at those housing related issues. And so that's why we are proposing that.
Thank you.
Director Matheson.
Would it be okay if I added maybe one other, I think under current statute, TRT revenues, transient room tax, cannot be used for affordable housing.
No.
And so this creates an opportunity and some revenue specifically to support the affordable housing mission for this project that, and as you say, or I think really made a good point, is this is a state project, and I think leaders involved with affordable housing are looking to us to help set an example or lead the way. Did you have a comment, Director?
I don't have a lot to add. I think it's been said that there is precedent for state authorities taking a transit room tax or an accommodation tax here. And with respect to affordable housing, we are, through our developer, developing affordable housing on the site, and think that that's important as part of setting an example, but wanted to do a little bit more that might provide opportunities, not just on the site, but in surrounding communities. And so creating this trust fund allows us to do that and have an additional tool. And so rather than, as some of the other authorities, just putting it in our pot, we thought we'd dedicate it to something that would serve a community purpose.
Great. Thank you. That answers my question.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next kind of group, we are anticipating addressing a number of governance related issues, as I mentioned, specifically some issues related to how funds are going to be used, making sure that they can be used in an expeditious manner. We are looking at adding an additional board member, someone specifically representing surrounding municipalities to the site. Again, even as we discussed in relation to the affordable housing, we recognize that while this site is located solely within the city of Draper, it's not going to impact just the city of Draper. And we hope to have a very positive impact throughout the entire state, but the surrounding area. And so we want to make sure that voice is represented. And then we have a number of issues related to site management. We are working very closely, obviously, with DFCM, and we want to make sure that all issues related to permitting and everything in that space are clear, and that Director Russell has all the authority he needs, and that Draper City can clearly point to where and how things are being done. So as I mentioned, a lot of technical and mundane things, but that are very important to moving the site forward. We are considering also making some changes related to the Open Public Meeting Act. As you all may recall, last year we made a change just specific to being able to discuss some financing arrangements, things along those lines that of course that are approved in open meetings, but to be able to have some discussions in closed meetings. And because of the unique nature of this project, recognizing that there may be some need to talk about some approvals and different things that, I shouldn't say approvals, things that this board may not be approving, but related to the development agreement or potential tenants or other things along those lines that the board may need to discuss that could have a competitive disadvantage if discussed prematurely. And then one issue that we don't anticipate incorporating into the bill that Senator Stevenson will be championing, but that we do have online are issues related to alcohol licensing. The Department of Alcoholic Beverage Services has been going through a year-long process of evaluating some of their the availability and the processing of different types of alcohol and liquor licenses. We recognize that in a few years, not immediately, but there will be a need for a number of licenses at this site. And we want to make sure that when that time comes, that licenses are available, but that we're also not unfairly competing with the rest of the state and entities are in other areas. So we want to make sure that we're fairly looking forward to that and making sure that we're accommodating that. So we're working closely with Department of Alcoholic Beverage Services in that space. Those are the main issues that we are anticipating covering this year. I'm happy to take any additional questions, or if there are items that you think that we are missing, also happy to discuss those.
Thank you, JC. Questions from members of the board? I don't see any hands or lights here. Oh, there is a question from Jim. Is your light on now?
Just one question, if there, whatever legislation happens that affects us, are we as a board going to be able to get a draft copy of that legislation and review it as it goes through the process and be able to comment?
I would think, yes. I think with the assistance of JC and our director and Scott, we'll make sure that those get distributed so that we are kept in the loop. So.
Yes, and it's currently being drafted. So as soon as that's available, we'll make sure that you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sure. Let me get your light on there.
Man down, hold on. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor Ramsey.
Thank you. In looking at the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, putting this together in some sort of surrounding region, whatever the boundary looks like for the area around the site. I'm assuming what you're talking about is that any RDA money or affordable housing money that is contributed by the municipalities will also be used in other municipalities outside of Draper, that the affordable housing can be dedicated throughout the region that will be putting money into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be our hope, is that we could create a fund that would benefit not just this site, but the communities surrounding it, recognizing that the folks who are going to be working at the site won't just live directly there, although many of them will have folks living in the surrounding communities. And that the surrounding communities are obviously going to be very invested in the services and everything else that are provided there. So yes, we're hoping to create an opportunity that could be amplified regionally.
Just making sure I was understood. That's kind of what I thought you meant, but I thought I'd like to clarify.
Yes.
Because I would have other questions if the intention was for all of the money from around there to all be used just at the site. So just wondering.
And to be clear, we think it's important right now to make sure that we create to create the tax, to create the fund. We are talking with and working with Draper City and surrounding municipalities, talking with Salt Lake County, thank you, as well, and some of the state entities in the space to make determinations as to how we can best utilize these funds. We think we have an opportunity to do some really creative things here that may be a little different than the traditional housing trust funds to meet our specific mission. That being said, we want to make sure that this gets created now so that we can continue to work with everyone to do that, yourself included.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. JC, for my information, maybe for the information where the board may have the same question. When we talk about, and I know this is in the formation phase of drafting and that sort of thing, but are we talking about accommodations as in hotel lodging, motel lodging, and essentially the same process that's used to collect TRT? Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes,
Okay.
this would be structured, at least the way we're anticipating it, it would be structured exactly as a TRT tax is, just simply as an additional version of that can be used for purposes outside of what TRT is limited to. As you know, those have very limited uses, and this would be for a very different purpose.
Do you anticipate that this would be in addition to a TRT tax that may be imposed by, say, Draper City?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Our intent is not to usurp or divert the funds that are currently going to Draper City or Salt Lake County.
Okay. And in my mind, part of the nexus between charging that is the having available labor to support those kinds of uses, hotel accommodations and whatnot. Having labor who is able to afford housing close by. So anyway, thanks very much for that presentation. Any other questions from the board before we move on? Excuse me. Oh, absolutely.
Thank you, JC. Appreciate that very much. We mentioned that these are potential statutory changes through legislation. We've also discussed in the past some funding for the backbone infrastructure of the project. And in a previous board meeting, we talked about the analysis we'd gone through looking at a range of strategies, different scenarios for funding infrastructure, from bonding to having the developer pay for it all to having some upfront money from the state, and have run the numbers, and in today's interest rate environment, recognize that the best return to the state would come from an upfront appropriation into our revolving loan fund. So the fund would be paid back with interest, would allow us to get the infrastructure in quickly, start generating the returns to the state more quickly. And you might have seen that in the governor's budget, that money is included, and we're working with the legislature and leadership on find the right balance, and certainly balance it with all the other needs in the state. So just wanted you to know that we'll be pursuing that piece as well.
Thank you, Alan. And I think it goes without saying, with our representatives on the board, and both senators and representatives having and getting your support for those measures will be critical, important. So thank you. Next item on the agenda, item number 6, is labeled temporary transfer of water rights for the Great Salt Lake. If you've been listening to the news or it's actually listed as action, isn't it? So I think it's appropriate, as outlined by J.C. Skinner. The chair would entertain a motion to support those proposed legislative initiatives for the board, for the project. Chair would entertain that motion.
My light's on, I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Jim, your light is on. Motion is to support the initiatives as described by JC. Second to that motion?
I'll second. This is April.
Thank you, April, for that second. It has been moved and seconded. Discussion to that motion. Any discussion from the board? Not.
I just want to make sure that we receive the opportunity to feedback and to comment. And with that, I'm supportive.
Thank you. I'll place that motion for vote unless there's any other discussion. All in favor of the motion to support these initiatives as have been described by our legal counsel, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Alan, for that reminder. Now, item number 6, is the issue of the transfer of water rights that are currently associated with the project property. And I was just saying, if you've watched the news or read the news about the Great Salt Lake, you're aware of a growing concern and a significant concern about depletion of the water level in the lake. This item is on our agenda because state leaders have asked this board to consider a transfer of our water rights to help address that issue with the Great Salt Lake. So we've asked our board member, Jim Russell, who is also director of DFCM, take a few minutes because he's familiar with the issue and he can educate us on that and help us to understand why this is important.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this on? I can't tell. Sounds like
I
it.
think so. Try it now.
How about now?
Is your light on?
Yeah.
Then it's
number
on.
3.
I'm going to get you more volume here. How about now?
That better?
That's a little better.
Okay. So just a little bit of an update or just for information for the board. There are 4 main water rights at the prison property. One is or around it. One, it would be the well right that we have for the well that we have across the street at the admin building, at the prison admin building. One would be the geothermal well that's on site. And then there are 2 irrigation company water rights, one with East Jordan Canal, we own 331 shares. And then with Draper Canal, we own 535 shares of that canal. So about 2 years ago, we were contacted by Division of Water Rights that because the water rights have not been used sufficiently, that they were looking at reducing our water rights to some extent. And so at that time, I hired a water rights expert within the AG's office to kind of defend and look into that and defend our position and ownership of the water rights. As it turns out, because we, with the prison, between providing water to the prison, DFCM and Department of Corrections are actually a distributor, and we bought water directly from Jordan Valley. And with that distributor's agreement, that meant that our water right cannot be diminished. We do not have to use our full water rights to retain them because we are a distributor. So that issue is off the table and our rights remain whole, and that's been settled with Division of Water Rights. So that's a bit of good news. Now we have some water rights that are not being used. Virtually none of them are being used other than a little bit from the geothermal well. I want to emphasize that the geothermal well, the only right that we have to that well and to that water is to take the heat from the geothermal well. The water's fairly hot. We can harvest the heat, but we have to put the water back in the ground. So that water can't be simply pumped to the Great Salt Lake to the Jordan River to get to this Great Salt Lake and help in this effort. The water right, obviously, in the well across the street at the admin building would be quite expensive to deliver that water to the Jordan River to help with this effort. However, the water rights that are not being used with the East Jordan Canal and the Draper Irrigation Company, they can be conveyed and shepherded on an agreement to ensure that that full water right is being delivered to the Great Salt Lake. And as you mentioned, this was kind of begun by Speaker Wilson in an effort with the governor's office to see if we can use these water rights in any way to help with that effort. And so they are supportive, both legislative leadership and the governor's office of us entering into 1-year agreements where we would have a shepherding agreement to ensure that that water each year is delivered to the Great Salt Lake to help with that effort and not being used by downstream users between the point and the Great Salt Lake. So with that, what we're proposing is that they are 1-year permits and that the board authorize us to enter into those agreements year by year for any unused water rights that we have at the time. So right now, the irrigation canal water, we do not have the folks grazing or irrigating out there anymore. The water rights are completely unused right now, and they will be for a few years likely, but we want to reevaluate, each year and have that opportunity to see whether they're being used or not, and then have those ensure that they're delivered. So that's the request, is that we ask the board to approve a shepherding permit 1 year at a time, and allow us to do that for any unused water rights that we can convey to the Great Salt Lake on a year-by-year basis.
Jim, year to year. So if the point comes that in the development of the project that those need to be used elsewhere, we could make changes in that. Is that right?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
And the water rights are, we felt like, we don't know what the future use is going to be exactly, but the water rights are too valuable to let go. And that's why we thought it was important to defend them. And they will be useful in some fashion or another as we move forward in this development.
Okay.
We can use them in many different ways. And, one of the possibilities on the East Jordan and Draper shares is that maybe possibly we can turn our water rights into them receiving water from us to handle our storm drain issues as well. So they'll be valuable in the future. Jordan Valley Water really wants our rights to the well on the other side at the admin building, but that will all be worked out through how the water is delivered to our site. And if that well at some point is conveyed, it would have to come back here to the board for that action, and it would be done in a way that benefits the project over years. So because water rights are the way they're conveyed, it requires board action for us to be able to change the disposition of those in any way.
Sure. If I could ask this question, what is there right now infrastructure in place that would allow that water to actually be transported to I was going to say the Virgin, I'm sorry, the Jordan River?
Yeah, we would just make sure that through the canals that eventually dump into the Jordan River would end up in the Great Salt Lake. So under this permit, there are water managers that manage the irrigation on this system all the way down. There's a couple of different folks that do this, and the agreement allows them to ensure that our water is being delivered to the Great Salt Lake.
Thank you. Other questions from the board? Let me get your mic on there.
This isn't a question, just a comment. I like the year by year. I like doing it 1 year at a time as the needs change and we see what happens with the Great Salt Lake and the difference that's able to be made comprehensively. And also as the needs of the site change, I really like the year by year, and this is good.
Thank you, Mayor. Other comments or questions from the board?
I just wanted to clarify, but I think we're asking for permission to do this year by year for unused and not have to come back each year and redo it, because it likely would be, 2 or 3 years probably at least before we would use those.
Right. Okay. Other questions? I don't see any other lights or requests. Okay. Hold on just a second, sir.
Okay.
It's a little unusual to take comments or questions from the public.
No,
But-
I understand.
But if you'll allow me, tell me who you're with or who you represent.
So my name is Bones Levitt. I work for a company called Erosion Control Services, and I actually have a plan that would be able to save 30% of the water use on all of the property on this project.
Okay.
That would come down to millions in dollars of savings. I'm not sure who to talk to, but I wanted to bring that up as well.
Well, we appreciate you bringing it up, and it sounds very, very promising. So what I'm going to recommend, if you're able to wait till the end of the meeting, or talk to Scott Cuthbertson right behind you, a little bit to your left, who is the deputy director, and the two of you can trade contact information. And I'm sure because it deals with water conservation, that we would like to, the directors would like to hear about your proposal.
Thank you very
Is-
much.
Is that fair?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for the
No, you
unusual.
don't have to apologize. Thanks. All right. Any other questions or comments with respect to Jim's presentation? Oh, Mayor Walker, if you would unmute then and identify yourself and let's hear from you.
And this is Troy Walker. Jim, my question is, if we do this, we're gonna do this for 3 or 4 years. I mean, are we gonna get hooked? Is the Great Salt Lake gonna get hooked on our water? I guess is the question. Because eventually we're gonna need water to do this project. And if you're saying we're gonna be giving it up, it seems to me it could be a scenario where someone gets addicted to the water, i.e. the lake.
But just to be clear, we're not conveying the rights to this water, just that it can be distributed and shepherded to the Great Salt Lake. So yeah, the Great Salt Lake is probably going to want it forever. I'm sure it's pretty thirsty, but we're not giving the rights away, just the ability to receive that water at a year at a time and be shepherded to make sure that it's delivered there.
As I understand it, this is not that much different than a local government, a municipality who enjoys water rights that they retain and are kind of in a lockbox, so to speak, in terms of the ownership of the rights. But if they're not being used, they have the opportunity to lease those or rent those rights or the use of the water, but not, they don't transfer ownership. Is it similar to that, Jim?
Yeah, this process is used probably mostly to use your water rights so you don't lose it.
Right.
And if you don't have anybody you can lease it to or whatever, if you don't use it over a period of time, they do take your water rights away. So,
Right.
And that's what we faced earlier. So this process is being, really for a different purpose, but we can use it for our need here.
And I'm believing that all of those or those issues and those protections can be addressed in the legal documentation.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor Walker. That help answer your question?
Yeah, I'm still concerned it's gonna get hooked. And there'll be some way to keep it hooked, but I guess we just gotta watch that.
Thank you. And it's certainly a concern because I believe that these water rights are going to be important for the development of the project when the time comes. So it's a good point. Other questions or comments from the board? So Jim, what is it in terms of our action you would like to see or would help us on this issue in terms of a motion?
I would just,
In fact, while you've got the mic, the chair would entertain a motion. Do you mind?
sure. I would move that we allow the point, which would be Alan and Scott and DFCM to sign agreements to a year-by-year shepherding agreement to allow any unused portions of our water shares to be shepherded and conveyed to the Great Salt Lake
Okay.
on a renewable yearly basis.
And can we say that's also subject to our legal counsel's review and stamp of approval?
Sure.
Okay. So that's the motion that's before us. Excuse me. Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mayor Ramsey. And it's been moved and seconded that we authorize the point through our director and deputy director and also our board member, Jim Russell, to enter into agreements to allow a portion of our water rights or unused water rights to be transported, delivered to the Jordan River to help offset the issues related to the Great Salt Lake. And those rights of use would be on a year-to-year basis and reviewed annually. Am I correct about that?
Yes, correct.
And that agreement would be subject to review of legal counsel. If I've stated the motion accurately, I'll place it for a vote. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Second. Oh,
We had a second, I
Alright.
think. Any opposed to the motion, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. So thank you, Jim, for your presentation and answering the question. Next item on the agenda is a financing approach update. We've asked Aaron Talkington is she going to join us virtually? To join and update the entire board on some of the financial issues related to the development for phase one. Along with that planning, we need to ensure that we have a mechanism for funding this proposed development. Over the past year, we've shared the progress of our financing models. Today, Aaron will share with us some additional analysis that RC Elco has conducted, and will also seek input from the board. So Aaron, if you can hear me, we'll turn the time to you if you'll unmute and help educate us on these issues.
I can. Thank you, Chair. I think I know most of you, for those of you who are new, I've been working with my firm, RC Elco, and myself have been working with the Point of the Mountain Land Authority for the last several years to help get to this point. And previously with the Development Commission. So we're quite familiar with the site, and what we're sharing today, some of which will be familiar for the returning board members, some of which might be a little bit of an update and a little bit of a refresh on where we are and where we're going. So let me pull up just a short presentation and then we can take any questions. So just to provide a quick refresh on what the business plan is for the site that we've worked with the board and others to develop over the last couple of years. There's a lot of ways to go about this, anywhere from, just, sell it off and let the market do whatever it's going to do to, state playing a much more significant role. And the business plan that's really resonated with this land authority and this board has been an opportunity that's in the middle. It's the state retains ownership of the land, which maintains state control. It maintains state revenues, and it also maintains state land use authority. And that last piece is actually fairly important because, were we to sell this land to a developer or to lots of different developers, that land use authority and all of that revenue and control would go to the city of Draper like a typical city project. And so the way to ensure that this maintains all of the state's goals and really can serve the broader population as opposed to becoming a local development project is for the state to retain land use authority. And so the proposal within this business plan and what we've been pursuing is a long-term ground lease with a series of developers. And we've heard loud and clear from this board that the goal is to have a variety of groups that are able to participate here, and that there's lots of opportunity for the private sector and for different groups to participate. And so based on that, we are working on a structure in which we're selecting master developers by phase. So you can see that red boundary on the map, is phase one. And there's an option, if that developer performs really well, they can move on to future phases. But the goal is to make sure that we're really getting a great performance out of our partners and that we're really well aligned with them. And that if we're not, that we can move on. And so, the second element of that is we want to make sure that we can attract and accommodate any great catalytic users that may come our way, whether that's, I know Mayor Walker loves the idea of a sports stadium. There's been talks of hospitals. There's been talks of, what happens if a major company wants to come here and have their own campus. And if those are uses that come our way and they can't be accommodated within the current phase, you'll hear us use the term subcampus. And a subcampus is kind of a different area outside of this first phase that could accommodate those specific users. And so, that allows us to move more quickly and to really take advantage of those opportunities that might come our way that really meet the state goals. Thinking about how this actually comes to reality, we've always envisioned that the state is going to fund the backbone infrastructure. The current proposal is that would happen through the revolving loan fund, which was partially funded last year with about $57 million. And we'll talk in a second about what backbone infrastructure means. It's not every white line that you see on this map or every pipe or every wire that might run here. It's kind of the core components that are going to make the site ready for development. And then the last piece that's really critical to the business plan here is that we're valuing the land at takedown in this ground lease. So that means when different sites get started and different buildings get started, and that allows the state to capture the upside that it's helping create. And so if something in phase 2 or phase 3 is going to be worth a lot more at that point in time, because of all of the great things that this board and this developer have done in early phases, we'll be able to realize that value as opposed to guessing and at that value today and hoping that we're close or hoping that somebody will pay us for it. And the critical way to get there is to start with the mixed use core, which is what's in this red outline, so that we can really reset the market to align with the vision of the site. And this is not advancing. There we go. So within that, this is really a unique situation for the state in the sense that, the value from the site is not just the land value, it's not just the ground lease, it's really the combined value of all of the tax revenue and the ground lease from the site. And so when we're thinking about how do we maximize the value of the state's property, it's really this combination of especially property tax revenue, but also the ground lease payments. And so that ground lease is really critical because the state's only going to capture that property tax equivalent if it remains the landowner. And we worked with the Gardner Policy Institute last year to do a really detailed and great economic impact analysis for the site. And they really estimated that building out this full framework plan, as we've described, generates 5 times as much economic impact for the state compared to a typical market-driven scenario, which we kind of sell off the land either all at once or in different pieces to different developers and just let them do their own projects. And so we really believe that whether you're evaluating it in GDP, tax dollars, incomes and jobs, that 5 times really continues to hold true. It's a significantly greater economic impact for the state to help drive and support the development over the long term, in terms of ensuring that it really does deliver the benefits that the legislature has asked us to deliver. So who's doing what? Our current proposal and what we're working towards right now with the funding that was described by JC and others is the state is going to identify funding and implement major roads and utilities, demolition and abatement. Right now it's not necessarily a site you can start building on. There's a prison building and there's old utilities and other things that need to be cleared from the site before somebody could start new construction. It's removing some other encumbrances to the site. I think most of you are familiar with the fact that there's really large power lines overhead. Some of those have to stay, but some of those can be removed. There's also a gas line that needs to be relocated. And then there's regional serving parks and trails, specifically River Range Park. And that's a regional community benefit. A private developer, it would not necessarily build that just for their own site. We see that, and we've heard from the public that that's critical for everybody's enjoyment of the property. And the private developer is really funding and implementing everything else. Pre-development, getting from where we have this pretty picture of a framework plan to detailed site planning, and building plans that we can actually build. They're building and funding the structures on the site. They're investing and planning all the placemaking, the things that at the ground level actually make it feel, like an enjoyable place to be. Programming, activities that might draw people here, local roads and utility connections to each site, housing affordability, sustainability, and tenant attraction. So there's a million other things we could put on these lists underneath here, but these are kind of the big buckets. And within that, just a reminder that phase 1 backbone infrastructure is really significant. We're starting about talking in the middle of the site, or sorry, we're talking about starting in the middle of the site. And that means that we have to build roads that get you to the middle of the site. That's a little bit of an unusual approach, right? If you were a private developer, you'd probably just pick this one little site on the edge and say, well, we'll start there because we can build just a little bit of a road and just a little bit of utilities. But that doesn't let you deliver the vision that's been outlined in the framework plan and supported by the community. And so that's why we're starting with this mixed use core that we really believe will deliver that vision for the state. And that means incurring about $165 million in backbone infrastructure costs. And that's for these highlighted projects on here. We believe that the most efficient way to do that is to increase the amount of funding in the revolving loan fund from that $57 million to $165 million investment. That'll be a loan that's going to be repaid by future revenues from the property and could be recycled for future projects. So if we wanted to extend the trail, we wanted to build more of a park, and we wanted to do some other road improvements, over time that capital could be reused. And it also realizes some pretty significant regional improvements. This is the extension of Porter Rockwell in this orange line that is in the regional transportation plan. This isn't just a road for our site. And the same with River to Range, which I think we already talked about. This 165 million will get us about a third of that first full build out, and then a trail connection that goes end to end, so that it can really be used by the public very early within the development. I'm not going to go into too much detail on what IPP is proposing within phase one. If you missed the December meeting, I encourage you to go back and listen to their detailed presentation of what they're proposing to build. It's about 2.3 billion in investment, and we really think that it's a special place. It delivers on the key vision elements and really does push for what we would describe as an above market level of density and amenity. This is trying to deliver on the goals that we've set and really set that bar high to start with. And there's some really unique attributes of this that are really necessitate some of that public funding up front. And one of those is that typically a developer would buy a site and then they'd use the site to go get a loan to build some of the infrastructure. If we're going to maintain ownership of the land, it's the state's responsibility to do that. And so we can use the revolving loan fund as a really efficient way to help implement that infrastructure up front to get this going. And kind of mitigate the fact that maintaining the control and the revenues over the long term means that it's harder for the developer to just go to a bank and get a check to start some of these things. The critical unique attributes here are that we're going to deliver the vision in phase one, rather than building into it over time. The state's going to maintain the ownership of the land. We're going to set that ground lease when each parcel starts, so we really can actually participate in the value ladder on the real estate. Both because parcels will be more valuable over time, and because the state can share in the upside on developments if they outperform. And it really maintains that land use authority. I know we're used to hearing, this is the point about land authority. Land use authority is really about saying what gets built, whether certain developments meet, expectations before, when they're in the planning phases. And so that's what lets us proactively shape what happens at the site, as opposed to, we could just write it in a development agreement and hope that a developer does it. But then the only way to enforce it is through lawsuits. So we'd rather be able to maintain the land use authority to help us ensure we work with our partners to achieve the vision, as opposed to just having, kind of like the hammer at the end of the day to say, oh, that wasn't what we wanted, or that wasn't what we told you to do. So it's a much more efficient and a much, kind of much more fluid way to make sure that we're really being good stewards of the site. And I think the last thing that's particularly unique is just the scale of the regional infrastructure that's delivered in phase one. And we can size it for the full community and for the surrounding need. And that reduces both the long-term cost and the benefits that are realized by the broader public to start with. And so, that isn't something that a developer would do on their own. And it is one of the benefits of the state financing that upfront revolving loan fund. And so we've used these numbers separately, but I just want to, maybe drive home, how significant we view the return on investment for the state as. This is $165 million in an infrastructure loan that's going to be repaid that initiates 2.3 billion in private investment. We think it maximizes the state return over the long term, both in terms of, that property tax equivalent, the ground lease, as well as all of the other things like income tax and sales tax and hotel tax and the other ways in which, the state and its citizens benefit from the project. It maximizes the state control over the project and the quality and the vision. It accelerates how we get those public benefits. And it's a very efficient use of both public and private capital. And so it really lets our developer focus on delivering some of those special sauce items, right? The state priorities and the key vision elements. And the state takes care of those initial pieces that are really critical for getting the development off the ground. And so, this is the approach that we feel like really increases the economic development and the innovation benefits and sets up the site to succeed over the long term. And with that, I'm happy to turn it back to you, Chair, take questions on other aspects of the public finance and the implementation.
Thank you, Aaron. And I just for the new members of the board, we got some questions, but this is not on for an action item. And essentially, we ask Aaron to come back and drill down a little deeper as to why this finance model is the best approach. And so her presentation helps answer those questions. Representative Tusher, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. And I first recognize, that I'm new here and I'm trying to come up to speed, and some of my questions have probably been asked and answered over and over the last couple of years. But I would appreciate at least a brief response, and then maybe we could take some time offline for me to get up to speed. But I think it's a really great presentation, because these are some of the exact same questions that I'm hearing from my colleagues, especially as we've gone out and asked for more money over the last couple of years to fund this area. And so being able to really understand this and be able to sell the message, I think, is extremely important. So a couple questions that I have, and kind of around this, how it's different than a typical development. If you go to the slide number 7, when you say that the state realizes value increases as they occur, can you explain how that actually happens? When would the state actually realize that increase in value if these are all based on 99-year land leases?
Sure. No, I'm happy to answer as many questions as you have, as well as we can find a time offline to provide some of the additional background that your colleagues have had the benefit of over the last several years. So the way that the kind of development is proposed to be structured is that, when you look at that big framework plan, it has all sorts of little parcels on it, right? And each time we start development on one of those parcels, we're going to value that parcel at the time it's developed. And so the first way that we're going to realize the value increases as they occur is that, a typical development, you say, oh, we have this whole site, we're going to establish a value today. And that value is a guess at either how much values are going to go up as the development progresses, or it's, in the worst case scenario, it's just whatever today's value for the site is. And so by establishing the value for each of those sites as you move through the development, it actually lets us say, okay, well, we built this really great mixed use place, in the first couple of buildings. This third site is worth more. We've really seen the market respond. And so the way this is going to work is we're going to say, okay, what is the value of that site now that you're ready to get started? Let's agree to it. And then let's establish the 99-year ground lease so that we get paid based on that value. And a ground lease is usually a percentage of the value gets paid to the landowner every year. And so we'll get to do that on every single site, right? So you can imagine site 20, site 50, we get to capture all that value increase. The second way we're going to capture value increase is within a ground lease. The payment doesn't stay static every year. It actually can increase based on two things. The first is, however, we set an escalation to reflect the, either the kind of a CPI increase or a rent growth increase and a value increase. And the second is through kind of some sort of periodic reset where we say, okay, well, we're 30 years into this. This land is worth a lot more than it was when you first started. And so there's opportunities to come back and say, what is the land worth today? And that's not every other year, but that's, kind of a couple of times throughout that lease period. So those are kind of the two most direct ways in which the state can realize those value increases.
Okay. And that makes sense. So what you're saying is, in a typical development, if the state were just handed over, the land would only be worth what it is today. And then the developer would get all the upside. Typically they wouldn't, they may lease it, they may sell on the property, but with those, with the ability to reassess the value, and as you continue to develop, the land value goes up, the state gets the benefit of that. That makes sense. Have you done analysis when we talk about, the large amount of this loan fund and what it would cost for the initial investment? Have you done an analysis to see how long you expect it would take to refill that development fund?
We have. It depends a little bit on which sources of revenue you use to repay it, as you may expect. We've been working with Zions Public Finance as well as IPP has been working with LWRB, and that group of kind of the four of us have been collaborating on that repayment schedule, which we'd be happy to share with you offline.
Okay, I think that'd be great. And then my last question at this point would be, and maybe kind of a question and comment on that last bullet of the state is in a unique opportunity where it can come in and maybe put in more infrastructure than a typical developer might do, because they're trying to balance their needs and they may not be able to get as big of loans or whatever it may be, which in the long term can reduce costs. But I guess the question is, if the state is trying to be nimble and trying to be economically efficient here, wouldn't it want to mirror a similar model that a regular developer would have? Or is there a fear that we might come in and kind of overbuild? In the long term, maybe there's less cost, but in the short term, you're putting in giant roads that aren't going to be used. There's time value, money, et cetera. Is there some fear that we may overdo it initially because we can, rather than acting in a more financially prudent model like a developer might do?
Yeah, you're right that it's a really fine balance to figure out where you maximize that efficiency and that return and where you're doing too much today. We've been working really closely with DFCM as well as other engineering groups to figure out what that means, right? What is it that we need today in terms of transportation, in terms of utilities, in terms of other things. I think one of the things, and maybe Jim Russell can speak to this if he'd like to jump in. You often see a community, if a developer were doing this, right, they just put in kind of like, okay, well, we need to get a water pipe, or we need to get a sewer pipe to the middle of the site to serve what we're going to do today, right? What we know we're going to do. And in 10 years, they're going to say, okay, cool, like we need a bigger one now. So we're going to come back and we're going to rip out the road that it's on top of. We're going to put in a bigger pipe. The first pipe was totally fine, right? It's not too old. It's not broken. So those are the types of things that we're trying to avoid doing. We want to make sure that we aren't, if we don't need to build a 6-lane road today, we don't need to build a 6-lane road, but we're going to preserve the right of way. We're going to build the beginning of the road in a way that it's pretty easy to expand, and where we don't have to rip it up to redo the infrastructure underneath as we see how this community evolves.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Stenquist, before we go to you, the questions that Representative Tusher has are good questions. And I was just going to say, Aaron, on any of this information you supplied in responding to him, or as for the rest of the board, if we wanted to drill down deeper, so to speak, with you and look at more of the studies and the statistics, you would be available for that.
Of course, I'd be happy to.
All right, Representative Stenquist.
Thank you, Chair Snow. I would like to take advantage of that opportunity. I think a lot of these questions that I have, and maybe even Representative Tusher and I could come up to speed on some of these details a little bit more offline, but I appreciate you taking some time. So this presentation was very helpful. It is a different model than most developments. So I'm trying to adjust, for example, having the state come in and build the road and utilities infrastructure up front. That's very different. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm gathering, correct me if I'm wrong, is that because we're capturing the lease revenue, that's going to help offset what normally would happen with the development where the developer puts in the road infrastructure. And so I understand, okay, this is different. And hopefully I trust that the business experts have made sure that this is going to hopefully pencil, because it is a different approach and I think it's kind of innovative. I also have some questions, and I don't have to necessarily have all these answers now, but I do kind of want to understand. I've seen this in the past, and maybe I just don't remember the details of the property tax revenue sharing between the state and Draper City and the school district and all the other property tax collecting entities. But just at a high level, does the state collect all of the property tax and then divvy it out to the other entities, or do their property taxes overlay on the site on top of the state property tax collection? Or is it one property tax they pay, or are they paying individual property taxes just at the regular rate for all those different taxing entities?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's one of the most unique aspects of this site. So state, JC will jump in and correct me when I get the terms not exactly right. State property that's used for commercial uses pays what's called privilege tax. The land authority has the right to set that privilege tax. We've decided that for all intents and purposes, it ought to be equivalent to what other property in Draper is paying. So when we talk about property tax and property tax equivalent, technically that is falling under the category of privilege tax. So the state collects it. It'll actually end up being collected through the mechanism that Salt Lake County already uses, but it goes to the state, and the state determines how much of it goes where. So we are in the process of an interlocal agreement with the city of Draper to ensure that, you know, if we need to remit some of that revenue to them to cover city services, that we can do that and they're made whole. And I believe we're in similar conversations with Salt Lake County. But the property tax revenue that we've been talking about is essentially fully controlled by the state because of the state ownership.
Okay, so given that the state controls the property tax, the distribution formulas with all the other taxing entities is still to be determined? That's still being worked on?
Yes, do you want me to clarify there? Thank
Go
you,
for it, JP.
Aaron. That's great. So as Aaron mentioned, that because it's state property and will remain state property, it's constitutionally exempt from property tax.
Of course, yeah.
And so what we did last year, what the legislature did, was impose what we're calling a fee in lieu of property tax. And as Aaron mentioned, the privilege tax is what is in place to typically deal with these kinds of state properties. We've gone a little bit different approach. It's a similar kind of concept, but we've imposed what we're calling a fee in lieu of property tax. So as Aaron mentioned, it is the equivalent of property tax. It will be calculated in the same way. Our development partners will know that this is not tax-free property that they're coming to operate on, but because it is state property, the state will capture that fee in lieu of property tax. And then as you have rightly described, we will, through interlocal agreement, work with those other taxing entities to address those needs in that space.
Okay, I think I understand that. Thank you. That helps.
Thank you, Representative. Further questions? Jim, you have questions.
Well, I just wanted to, Representative Tesher, you know, you talked about the infrastructure and some concern about the dollars that we put there. Do we build the infrastructure too large? And maybe it's not used, and maybe it's actually past its life when it is used, right? Portions of that. And that's really concerning to us. So we're going through schematic level design to understand what that full build out will be like. But I personally have no interest or desire to build the full build out. I think that more like a half build out of the roads and maybe not doing sidewalks and so forth, landscape and that, and put that on the developers as they come in makes more sense. That's what we did out in the Northwest Quadrant when we built the prison. The advantage that we have here, though, that we didn't have out there, is that, you know, we put $100 million in infrastructure out there. We partnered with the developers. We reduced what we had to put out there for the prison by half building, you know, and working with the developers there. But we had no way to recap the cost that we put in. Here, we're increasing the value of the property, and then that we'll be able to recapture and repay that loan from the infrastructure loan back to the state. So that's the good thing here. And, you know, that's the first properties that you've seen after, you know, we put infrastructure in there, started to develop really fast with nothing in the, you know, before that at all out there. But the property value, the first time that any developers bought property out there, it was 7 times what we paid for the property for the prison. So I think that there's a great value, as Aaron's alluded to, by the state putting in infrastructure to get that development going and to increase the the land value just because of it being in place. But we certainly have to build the infrastructure, the power, the water, the gas, you know, that and storm drain and sewer to be able to handle the whole development, because we don't want to like put in that infrastructure, the main Porter Rockwell Road and some of the loop roads, and then tear them back out again. But we want to do it in a way that makes sense. And one of the examples I would say is with Draper City, right now, it looks like they'll probably provide the water, but they don't have storage capacity. So, you know, in working with them, we don't need to build, 12 million gallon reservoir all at once right now. We would build it in 4 million gallon increments and that as time goes on. So, you know, we're looking at phasing and doing what makes sense and not putting things in place that might not be used or might change, and also things that might be end of life usage before they actually do get used. So we are looking at that, and I just want to assure everybody that that's being considered.
Thank you, Jim. Other comments from the board or questions from the board? Let me make one brief comment, and it was an issue you raised, Representative Tusher, and one that I had with respect to a 99-year lease. One of the things that I think is really important in order to stay consistent with capturing the increase in value is what I call the lease reset. You don't see them very often. You see escalators, sometimes tied to an index. But in this case, what we anticipated and what I believe we're going to see is some resets where oftentimes on a long-term lease, the escalator doesn't really keep pace with the market. A reset will be tied to the market. And I think that's one of the ways that we're going to be able to take advantage of these, of the appreciation value of the property. But with that, Aaron, we appreciate your presentation, but we also appreciate your invitation to any member of the board. And they can work through Alan to get your contact information, and Alan may be willing to set up the meeting that Representative Stenquist and Representative Tusher talked about to get more detail, because they are correct that our colleagues do have a lot of, in the legislature, have these kinds of questions. And they are also correct in that this is not the traditional model that we see for development. But I feel really confident in the financial help we received both locally from Zion experts, bank, as well as Erin and the folks that work on her team. And after weighing all of the options, I think, at least for me, this is the right balance going forward. And Aaron, you said it correct, I think, when you said that the challenge is finding that right balance. And Jim spoke to it too. Investing what we need to without over-investing, but investing enough to, as you said in that last slide, further or create the vision, deliver the vision up front, because that's what's going to deliver the value as we proceed with the development. So I didn't mean to make a speech there, apologize for that, but thank you, Aaron, again for your presentation. So with that, we're going to go to the next item on the agenda, which is to discuss a meeting next month. And for that, I've asked our director, Alan, to help lead that discussion, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And maybe just one comment related to that previous discussion. The approach isn't totally unprecedented for development. So if you look at what happened at Daybreak, the landowner, Rio Tinto, went and put in significant infrastructure up front, the lakes, the trails, many of the roads. And then by doing that, increased the value of the land before it went to the developers. So in this case, the state's the landowner and doing something quite similar. So
Alan, this is April. Also, don't forget, Sitla had a type of joint venture too that's been very successful.
That's right. Sitla's done a number of projects, including Desert Bloom down in the St. George area that has taken some of the same approach. So there is some precedent for it. So we schedule monthly board meetings on the second Tuesday of each month. It's not lost on us that the next scheduled board meeting in February is in the middle of the legislative session. And while there is a lot happening right now with our project and we want to get ongoing input, we also recognize that we can't do that without a quorum. And in past years, we found that we were not able to get a quorum during the legislative session for obvious reasons. So wanted to at least present to the board the option of canceling the February board meeting as we have in the past, unless all of you feel like this meeting will be the top priority and we'll be able to be there and conduct business. So that's the agenda item, and wanted to see if you had any comments or thoughts on that.
Chair Snow had to step out, so I'll just take over here. Let's see if there's any questions or comments from the board on discussion to this idea. Let's go to Representative Stenquist.
I would suggest we cancel the February meeting. The March meeting will be after the session, so it's just one meeting that we end up canceling. So I think that makes sense.
Jim?
Favor. Though then Alan has to bring us Valentine's cookies because that'll be Valentine's Day.
That's great. Any other
Board has
comments?
so much power over my life. It's just amazing.
Anything online? All right, well then we'll entertain a motion to cancel the February board meeting. Is there someone willing to make that motion? Jim has made the motion to cancel the February board meeting. Can we get a second? Second from Representative Stenquist. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, number 9, Director's Report. And we'll turn some time over to Director Matheson to provide an update and answer questions regarding recent activity.
Thank you, Representative Tusher. I'm not going to go through a lot of detail. We've covered much during this meeting, but a couple of points that I'll make. First of all, when this board first came together, we had members of the board fill out conflict of interest and disclosure forms. It's just a matter of good practice to ensure that we're avoiding conflicts and that the public understands the activities in which our board members are engaged. So we feel that it's time to do that again, especially with some new members of the board coming on and probably refreshing with our existing board members. So we plan to send out copies of the disclosure form, conflict of interest form this week to you. We'll send it electronically. And I know it's a busy time, but ask if you complete those by January 20th. That'll ensure that we can have them in hand and that we're continuing to comply with our commitment to transparency and openness as a board. So expect to see those in the next few days. You're also aware that we're very much involved in the negotiations over the development agreement with our additional partners, Innovation Point partners. They've been terrific to work with. We had a very constructive meeting in December that clarified a number of issues, and we've been, I think, moving forward very positively. They submitted a new term sheet to us just before Christmas. We're reviewing that term sheet and preparing the response, but think that it was a meaningful step forward. You're also aware that demolition of the site has begun and is well underway. We're still hoping that that can be completed into the next year, late summer, early fall, but there are always little surprises, as we saw during the event where we kicked off the demolition and went to tear down the tower and it was resistant, didn't want to come down. So for some reason, that prison was not built to be demolished easily. So, Jim, any update or thoughts on that? I think a lot of us think that all you do is go out, swing a heavy ball around, and within a couple of months, it's done. But it is a complex process, and right. Well, we appreciate that, and I think related to that, we've already talked about infrastructure and some of the planning and how we're trying to phase that and be as efficient as possible. We're working very closely with DFCM and with engineers in outlining the process for getting the roads, the pipelines, the utilities, the electrical, gas, et cetera, in the side, as well as parks and trails. And we all know the value that Jim brings as a board member, but I also want to emphasize he's brought tremendous value as the director of the Division of Facilities, Construction and Management. His experience in ensuring that we can do this efficiently, thoughtfully, is really valuable. And so I just thank you, Jim, for that. Mentioned transit's a big piece here, and we know there are a number of discussions going on at higher levels than this in the legislature with UDOT, UTA, et cetera. But we have regular meetings with UDOT and UTA about transit. We recognize that high quality transit is just fundamental to the success of this project. Won't happen otherwise. So we're talking a lot about different modes, ensuring that the alignments work, exploring some creative approaches, including little personalized transit pods that allow you to go directly to your destination without stopping at every stop, and advanced aerial mobility, so air taxis and other things. That's not going to happen in the next couple of years, but we want to be prepared so that we can accommodate those kind of more futuristic approaches. Then finally, I'll mention a few things on communications. We're in the process of updating the website with the new information and the new decisions you made, the new board members on it. We issued a year-end review newsletter that summarized the things that we've done over the last year, and I think it's an impressive list, and we've had good feedback from the public from that. Working closely with Innovation Point partners on stakeholder outreach, making sure that we're trying to touch as many bases as possible as we're doing all of these other things. And to their credit, they're working more than full time to advance this project, to talk to a number of people, to get the development agreement in place, to resolve issues from housing affordability to you name it, all without a development agreement signed. And so we appreciate that approach. We're meeting with curators about a public art program and the Focal Point initiative that we've talked about. So lots of work going on with respect to public involvement and communications. And I think we've got a potential opportunity to actually wrap up a meeting early, and I don't want to be the one that prevents us from doing that. So I'll leave it there unless there are questions.
Any questions for Alan? I think it's apparent. I hope to members of the board and to the public, there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes with our director, deputy director, and our consultants and everyone that's involved. We appreciate their help, and I think the state is fortunate to have them on board. I was informed by our legal counsel, JC, as I walked back to take my seat here, that we were lacking a quorum when you voted on a motion to cancel the February meeting. That was in part, or at least related to me not being at my seat. So I wasn't here for that motion. Who made that motion? Representative Stenquist, do you mind quickly remaking that motion, and we'll quickly get a second and quickly get a vote. Then we won't have to worry about coming here next month. Well, I mean to this meeting. Let me get you a light there.
Okay. I move to skip the February meeting.
Motion is to move to skip the February meeting. Do I have a second on the motion? Who was the second? Jim second. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair rules, motion carries, and we won't plan on meeting here. So with that, we're near or nearly at the end of the meeting. Just, this is a personal note. I was, leaving the legislature is kind of a challenge. It's hard. You leave legislature, but sometimes it doesn't leave you very easily. But I was also, I feel a real excitement and passion for this project. And so it wasn't that the governor had to twist my arm very hard when it was suggested that I come back and help be a member of this board. So I just want you to know that I am very grateful and honored to be involved and to be with everybody on this board and on our consultants and everyone. It's a real honor for me. And so I travel a little bit to get here, but that's okay. This will be a significant project for our state. We use the term generational in impact, but it truly will. And a lot of it's because of the work that we're all doing, making sure that it's planned and executed well. So anyway, with that, and Alan's correct, we have the chance to adjourn before our allotted time. So with that, Chair would entertain a final motion. Mayor Ramsey, motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? Seconded by Jim. We'll place that. All in favor of that motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.